One of the things that I think really exemplified the value of Bernie Sanders' campaign up to this point, okay, regardless win or lose,
Yeah.
and I think also argues for the value for him to stay in regardless of what happens in New York State, was this exchange on the minimum wage, because Hillary Clinton has moved on this. There's no doubt about it. And,
yeah, of course. Absolutely.
And here it is. This is the exchange on the minimum wage.
When this campaign began, I said that we got to end this starvation minimum wage of 7.25, raise it to 15. Secretary Clinton said, let's raise it to 12. There's a difference. And by the way, what has happened is history has outpaced Secretary Clinton, because all over this country, people are standing up and they're saying 12 is not good enough. We need $15 an hour.
Okay.
Go ahead, Secretary.
And to suddenly
Secretary, go ahead.
Thank you very much.
Suddenly announce now that you're for 15, I don't think it's quite accurate.
All right, Secretary.
All right. I have said from the very beginning that I supported the fight for 15. I supported those on the front lines of the fight for. It happens to be true. I supported the 15 effort in LA. I supported it in Seattle. I supported it for the fast food workers in New York. The minimum wage at the national level right now is $7.25, right? We want to raise it higher than it ever has been. But we also have to recognize some states and some cities will go higher, and I support that. I have taken my cue from the Democrats in the Senate, led by Senator Patty Murray and others, like my good friend Kirsten Gillibrand, who has said, we will set a national level of 12 and then urge any place that can go above it to go above it. Going from 725 to 12 is a huge difference. 35 million people will get a raise. 1 in 4 working mothers will get a raise. I want to get something done, and I think setting the goal to get to 12 is the way to go, encouraging others to get to 15. But of course, if we have a Democratic Congress, we will go to 15.
Senator, go ahead.
Well, I think the Secretary has confused a lot of people. I don't know how you're there for the fight for 15 when you say you want a $12 an hour national minimum wage.
Now, I think that last line by Bernie, who cares about that, in my estimation, okay? What was really interesting was she said, if we have a Democratic Congress, we'll go to 15. And
well, I think the key was, right, and I guess the question is with all this stuff is, we'll go to 15, so it's sort of, will you go to 15 if 15 is signed and on your desk, so you're not going to veto it, or will you lead the fight to go to 15? Right?
Well,
which is clear that Bernie Sanders is passionate about it and would lead that fight. And look, I think that there have been arguments made from the progressive side that 15 is something that should be fought for in higher in states that have a higher cost of living, and particularly in cities. But going up to that may be more difficult, and may not even be the wisest policy immediately in some other states. I've heard that. At the same time, I think what you're pointing out, Sam, the value here.
Right. Put aside for a moment the policy debate about this. When she says,
what I think is, even is right policy-wise, because clearly, I think there should be. This is one of those issues with cost of living being so different, that what you make if you live in New York City should be different, maybe, than the minimum wage if you're in rural Nebraska. I get that, obviously. I think that anyhow. But to me, the fight for 15, as well as everything else that Bernie is doing, is that suddenly you have this. It's almost like this area. You had like a far right, a center right, and a center left. And you had this big gaping hole on the left, if you want to imagine it on a chart in your brain. Nothing there, right? I mean, a couple of offhand statements here and there, mostly in the past by people that either lacked credibility or, someone like Dennis Kucinich, for example, who could be, often could be laughed off the stage because people could say things about when he was mayor of Cleveland and the lake caught on fire. There's there were things. Whereas here, you finally have what we all read about in history books. Though even I don't know the average age of your listeners, Sam, but even for those of us in our 40s who were born in the 70s, we never saw this. You were too young to see this. You know what I mean? We were too young to see that vibrant left in Democratic primaries putting forward a position that was well beyond, because the last time was probably someone like McGovern, and well beyond maybe where we're going to end up getting. But it's like the arguments, the discussions, whatever you want to say, we've had with President Obama when you try to negotiate from the beginning, which is it means that this whole area that didn't exist before now exists. And I think that this is what I always talked about with Obama. I know people threw out the sort of whole Green Lantern thing and, the president can't do everything. But my argument always was what the president can do, what celebrities can do often, but certainly the president being the biggest political celebrity of them all, is change the culture around something so that if you push a little further, a lot of activists then feel more comfortable, like they're not standing out on a limb by themselves.
All right,
and there are plenty of activists maybe willing to do that, but there's a lot more regular people who aren't.
And
that's what Bernie's doing, as far as I'm concerned.
I mean, let's track this, right? 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago, the Fight for 15, there are strikes in, half a dozen McDonald's, essentially, or fast food places. Everybody says this is crazy. It's not going to go anywhere. And they've been building up each year. Then they spread it to places like Walmart. Then you had these strikes that are happening all across the country and multiple times a year. And Bernie then promotes it even more. And I mean, this, I guess it's not that fast, but I mean, the way you can track this, and here she is, okay? Because look, let's say you could be for $12, and I want to add, Kristen Gillibrand is a co-sponsor on Bernie Sanders legislation, as far as I know, if I don't have this mistaken, which is $15 an hour. So she has changed her policy stance on this. She's now saying if she gets, she's arguing, if you listen to what she argued there, she said, look, there are some places where it needs to be lower, and there's some places where it needs to be higher. But the last thing she says, however, despite that, if it comes to my desk, I'll sign it. So she's
it just shows you can't campaign that way. You know what I mean? So that's why I separated what I think policy-wise from the way that
yes, but my point is, yes.
You need to set a standard and fight for it.
But she's moved. She has moved.
Oh, my God, absolutely.
And this is really, I think, important that people have to understand. She has moved. And it shows the power of what you get. You're right. We hear a lot about Green Lanternism. It shows the power. She has now been moved. She didn't move herself. She has been moved. So
let me say, because just to jump here quickly, and again, I take no credit for this because this was never any. So let me be very clear. But I've been lucky enough to do some work with somebody you've had on your show, which is Nick Hanauer, who had a lot of credibility as an original Amazon investor. And, as a venture capitalist saying 1%ers are being crazy, this is not the way you grow an economy. And you need a vibrant middle class because that's who's buying things. And one of the first things he did, I think it was David Rolfe of the SEIU in Washington State, they were some of the original. I'm not saying it was just the two of them, but on a commission in Seattle, that's where this originally bubbled up, where they were fighting for the $15 minimum wage. And it reminds me of something, we've done, which I have been more involved in with Nick, which was doing PR and some of the pushing around the overtime rule, which you've also talked about in the show. And that's a classic example because had we gone into that, we've got this terrible rule that hasn't been updated since the mid-'70s. And so you're looking at you don't get guaranteed overtime unless you're making, if you make anywhere more than about $23,600 a year. Well, we started calling for what it would taking it back to the 1975 level, adjusting for inflation, whatever, and so that it should be 3 times that, 69,000. Well, where does it look like we've ended up? At 50,000.
Right.
And the NFIB is fighting this, all the way, as is the Chamber of Commerce, the usual suspects you'd expect on the right. But that's the point. When you start off pushing for 69, they would have fought 69. They would have fought 50. They would have fought if you'd said you wanted 24.
Right.
You know what I mean? So you go for what you can go for if you've got a justification for it, and you've got research or science that backs up what you're saying, and And then, nothing's done yet, and the fight's still going on, but it looks like we may end up, more than doubling this threshold. And so it's the same thing with the minimum wage.
Yep.
They fought for 15. Seattle's an expensive city. New York certainly is. California and the cities there. And if everywhere doesn't get there right away, everywhere doesn't get there. But you set that goal and you fight for it knowing that you're going to fall short in some place.
That's right. And so you don't, if it turns out to be President Hillary Clinton, she's no longer really going to say the $12. She just said if 15 gets there. And so that whole thing, Hi, I'm Sam Cedar, and this is an Ann Coulter doll.
You should not be immigrating here. Stay in your country and hate us.
For smart progressive talk and a little bit of this and even a little bit of that.
Mission accomplished.
Subscribe to our podcast, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and like us on Facebook to get some of our best video clips.